I can either assume the worst or believe the best. And we experience gaps all the time, every day, in every relationship.
Welcome to the Beyond High Performance podcast, featuring content and conversations from me, Jason Jaggard, along with our elite coaches at Novus Global, their high-performing clients, and the faculty of the Meta Performance Institute for Coaching. On this podcast, you'll hear some of the world's best executive coaches and high-performing leaders, artists, and athletes discuss how they continue to go beyond high performance in their lives and businesses. Welcome to the Meta Performance Show. I'm your host, Jason Jaggard, and today we're exploring a question every leader needs to wrestle with. How much of your impact depends on finding and partnering with the right assistant? The truth is, you cannot multiply your influence alone, and today's guest shows us why. I'm joined by Diane Grant, who for over 25 years has been the trusted executive assistant and strategic partner to Andy Stanley, best-selling author, world-renowned communicator, and founder of North Point Ministries, one of the top 10 most influential faith organizations, not just in the US, but in the world, serving millions every year, and she's been there for it all. This isn't just about administrative excellence, it's about the hidden players who make high-level leadership possible and what leaders can learn from them. In this episode, Diane talks about two different types of assistants and making sure you pick the right one, when to hire an assistant, best practices for working with an assistant, and tips for assistants on how to powerfully work with those they support. Her story is a masterclass in influence behind the scenes and leadership rooted in service. So whether you're leading a global organization or a fast-growing team, this conversation will challenge you to rethink how you scale and how you create partnerships that drive lasting impact. Let's dive in. I'm so thrilled to have Diane Grant here, and she has been the assistant to one of the most influential spiritual leaders in America for the last several decades. She's with North Point Community Church. North Point is one of the top 10 largest faith communities in the world. And also, I want to say briefly that faith-based organizations are some of the hardest organizations in the world to lead because they have all the complications of course, religion, and then education, nonprofit, for-profit elements, the political nature of these organizations, the social dynamics. It is, as our company works with companies in every domain, when you're working with people in the spiritual leadership space, there are like 15 added layers of emotional, psychological complexity that make it very difficult. And Andy and the team there for decades now have consistently led with not perfection, but with excellence in a way to where, what is it now, 50 to 70,000 people across the globe gather under the influence of that community. Is that correct, Diane?
Oh, more than that. We have, just in our 8 Atlanta area campuses, we have about 40,000 adults, active adults, and then students and children. But then we have a national and international partner networks. So they are partner churches. They're separate 501c3 organizations, but they partner with us. They use our model. We have over 100 locations in the U.S. and over 100 internationally. So I don't honestly know what the big number is.
Numbers,
but yeah.
And I just want to point out to our listeners as we get into this, that's insane. Like that's like, if you're thinking about this in terms of purely for-profit, like that's like Fortune 10 companies, that's NVIDIA, that's Meta, that's Apple, that's Alphabet. North Point really does belong in the category of those companies with the success and the complexity and the level of leadership acumen that is required to accomplish that kind of thing. And so then Diane has been, in many ways, like the right-hand person to the founding and lead pastor of this organization for decades. And so I'm thrilled. She's the Wizard of Oz. She is the person behind the curtain. And so much of what assistants do, this whole conversation is going to be around how powerful assistants are and how to work well with them. And Diane, I was thrilled when we first met to be able to talk with you. So I want people to get to know a little bit about your history, because you didn't just, it's not like when you were 20 years old, you just became an assistant to a pastor and then things took off from there. You were in the business world. And can you tell us about a few of your jobs and some of that acumen that'll be relevant for us later?
Okay, sure. I started my career in the medical industry. I am a nurse, a registered nurse, and I worked in pediatric oncology and did that for several years, and then made the transition to medical sales. This was, a lifetime ago, and medical companies were just understanding the value of hiring nurses. And so I was sort of part of that first wave. So then I had a second career in medical sales. and medical sales management, which I was better at than I was at sales. And worked for 2 or 3 companies. A couple of them were really amazing in how they trained and invested in their teams. And so I learned a tremendous amount there. I was actually a regional vice president for a medical staffing company. I had several branch offices and a large team and managed a significant budget. And just some things in the with that company sort of blew up, and I quit and was taking a sabbatical, and North Point started, and that's when I learned I'm not very good at being idle, sitting at home. And so I started volunteering and volunteered my way into a job. So that's how I made the transition to ministry. It was not something I set out to do.
Well, and that's we talked about this earlier, but you were a rock star in many ways in those spaces, and frankly, getting paid well and doing very well. And it's not like you couldn't have just jumped back into that kind of, for lack of a better phrase, like rat race or whatever. But you chose to do this, and just for those of you who are listening, as difficult and as complex as faith-based leadership is, it does not pay particularly well. But you chose to step in. So you chose to step into something that paid less.
Yes.
Even when you were at the height of your skills.
Yes.
Can you talk to our audience a little bit about what motivated you to do that and why that might be significant as people try to do what you're doing?
I realized looking back on it that the jobs that always fulfilled me the most were the ones where I felt like I was really contributing significantly. I realized I probably would not have loved a sales job that was selling a widget. I was selling things that were helping people. And that sort of translated into my role here. From the beginning, first of all, it was an amazing leadership team. It was amazing people that I was working with. As you've already said, top of the top in terms of leadership. Mm-hmm. And we were doing something that really mattered and building something that really mattered and had the opportunity to really impact a lot of people. And that was appealing to me. So I realized money wasn't necessarily the huge motivator for me. Do I wish it paid more? Sure, but it wasn't the biggest motivator. And when I was volunteering here, I was doing contract work in the medical industry to support my volunteer habit. And so when I was approached about taking a role, I realized that's when we realized, okay, wait a minute, you're doing all this over here to support your ability to work at the church for free. So what would happen if you actually worked at the church for real? So it really was about helping. I really felt like I was investing in something that had the potential to have a huge impact.
A huge impact. And by the way, so one of our firms, we have a free assessment called the 5I assessment. We can put a link to that in the show notes, and it talks about how people actually in given seasons are motivated by different things. And people oftentimes just assume that everyone's primary motivator is money. And to your point, it's not like that's not a motivator. Like, compensation is important, but it wasn't in that moment your primary motivator. It sounds more like your primary motivator was impact. And by the way, that's true even in like lucrative industries. It's amazing how people deep down inside, they long to make a difference. And you've had an upfront and personal view of jobs where that's like the primary reason why everyone does what they do. Can you talk a little bit to people maybe who've never been exposed to like a church world, or maybe would never even think about, for a variety of reasons, working at a church? Just briefly talk about, Diane, what is it like when you work in an environment where almost everyone, their primary motivator is impact and is making a difference?
Oh, that's a good question that I'd not thought about. In the beginning, we hired a lot of people from the marketplace. We did not hire a lot of people from a church background. So I was not an anomaly. I'm still not an anomaly. And so I think we all just saw, and we didn't know we were going to be huge like we are. We just assumed we would have a fairly large single-site church in the Atlanta area. But we knew that there was potential for impact there. And so that's what we were drawn to. So I'm surrounded by people who, sort of have the same mindset, because most people I know, or most people I work with, are just like me. They gave up the opportunity to do big things or other organizations to come and lend the best years of their career here.
Yeah. Well,
And let me say, can I say this too?
Yeah, please.
I thought about this so many years ago. One of my coworkers had gone to some conference. I don't even know what it was. She came back and was talking about it. And she said one presenter had talked about his view, her view, that people are motivated by one of three things. One would be power. They want the authority. Or one would be position. They want the title. And the other would be influence. And immediately I knew that my motivation, that for me, what motivates me is influence. And that explained to me why I was okay going from being a regional vice president on an upward career trajectory to being a pastor's assistant at a church. Because I was in a position of tremendous influence.
Tremendous influence. And now it's been for decades.
Yes.
And so the first question I have in regards to being an assistant for that long is, like, what do you think has allowed, what are some best practices for you and Andy that have allowed you to work together for so long? Like, not that I don't want to romanticize necessarily. It's totally fine when people do different things and do different jobs and move on to different things. And I think there's something special about a working relationship that can go the distance like you have. And so as I have an assistant, and as many people who are listening to this have an assistant, what would you say are some of the secrets to being able to have something that a working relationship that fruitful?
Well, I think that first of all, Andy is very clear about what his priorities are. He's done talks on doing what only you can do. And I mean, he lives that. He just doesn't talk about it. So he's very clear about what his priorities are, which then in turn makes it very clear what my priorities should be and how I can help him. We sort of drifted into it, but I realized over time that as we started talking about one-sentence job descriptions for our organization, I started thinking about what mine was, and I realized that my job is very clear. It's to keep his path clear of non-essential tasks and decisions, allowing him to do what only he can do. And so when knowing so clearly what my role is, my primary role is, has made it easy to stay focused. We have a really strong culture of trust over suspicion here. I mean, it's something we talk about. When there's a gap between what I experience and what I expect, I choose what goes in the middle. Do I assume the worst, or do I believe the best? So that really informs all of our relationships. But our relationship, practically, we meet weekly. We've met weekly for 28 years, and that I think is huge because, first of all, from a relationship standpoint, everything's going to get talked about within a week. So there's no time to keep long accounts. So everything's going to be addressed. And then practically in terms of the role, I mean, that's when we have the opportunity to talk about what I'm doing, what I need to be doing, what he needs. We just talk every week. If we didn't have that meeting, it would be really hard for me to do my job.
I want to double click on some of the things you've just said, because there's gold in them that are hills. So let's work our way backwards. So when you mentioned like not keeping short accounts, and meaning like when things get sideways or there's misunderstanding or the machine's not working, that you're not going to go more than 7 days without being able to talk about it. Now, I know people who meet every day and they never talk about things. So is there a structure in place to help you and Andy like clean the slate, or is that just more oriented around your character, or is it both? Like, tell us what the meeting, that weekly meeting looks like.
It's really interesting. I can't think of any time really when we've really gone sideways relationally. I mean, and I'm not even gonna, I have no idea why, but we just haven't. And so the meeting isn't necessarily to resolve conflict or to resolve any angst. It really just means that everything's on the table. So if I'm heading down a path and he wishes I would head down a different path, that's when we talk about it. So we don't, it's not a month later and I've not met his expectations, or he's not met mine, or there's just no opportunity for that to happen because we are talking about everything every week. And the meeting really, it does have to do with, with business. He's very much a delegator. So he doesn't really probably know 90% of what I do. but the meeting is an opportunity to tell him what I'm doing that he needs to know about or that he wants to know about. And it's the time for him to, express to me, okay, here's what I think, here's what I want, here's the course correction we need to make. So the meeting really is crucial, and it's very structured. I lead the meeting. And we laugh that it's his favorite meeting of the week, which it's not. But he tells himself he's making progress, so that motivates him.
Yeah.
But he gives it. He gives me the time. I go over. I usually let the calendar guide the first part of the conversation. So we go over whatever's on the calendar, talk about whatever needs to be talked about what's upcoming. And I get from him what my marching orders are. Here's what he wants to do. He's traveling. When does he want to leave? Does he want to get back? He needs to schedule this meet. So we talk about all those specifics. And then we transition from that into just the general, this staff person has come to me with this question, or this person has emailed me with this question. And that's when I can give him information he needs and then get all the questions answered that I need answered so that I can keep moving forward.
Yeah, well, I mentioned a little thing you mentioned there where 90% of what you do, he probably doesn't know about. And that doesn't mean like that there hasn't been alignment. That means that that's actually what he's paying you for. He's paying you to keep things off his plate as well as to surgically put things on his plate.
Right. My job really is to keep his path clear. So if it's not something that he needs to know about or wants to know about or needs to have input into, then I generally handle it. And then I'll inform him if it's something that, he would need to be informed about. But sometimes I don't even inform him because it's handled and, there's just so much. He can't know about everything. So
that's right. Well, and I feel like your organization is really good at the Pareto principle, like what's the 20% that accomplishes 80% of where you want to go, and focusing on that. So I want to go back to the other thing you mentioned, the one sentence job description. So this is something that North Point does, and and of course, everyone has like a longer like job responsibilities and everything, but almost everybody in the organization, when they come onto the organization, you work with them to whittle down to like the core essence, the one sentence of, if all else fails, what's the North Star for this deal? And I'd like for you to say again for our audience what your job description is, and I want to ask you some questions about it.
Okay. It is, my job is to keep Andy's path clear of non-essential tasks and decisions, allowing him to do what only he can do. So I champion his ability to focus.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. And was that, I'm assuming that job description evolved over time, or is that something can you talk a little bit about the evolution of that and how you both came to how that is one of the most powerful ways that you can serve him?
It evolved when he started teaching on one sentence job descriptions. I can remember the first time we talked about it, I sat there and thought, oh, what is mine? And I realized, okay, this is what I do. So then I presented it to him and said, this is what I think I do. Is this what you want me to be doing? And so he refined it a little bit, but it really did evolve because he is a great delegator. And from the day one, he would delegate. And when we met more often in the beginning, and I would list all the calls I got or all the emails I got, and he would tell me what he wanted me to do with them. Well, I only had to ask him how to handle a certain situation 2 or 3 times and get the same answer and realize, oh, okay, now I know how to handle that. Don't have to ask him about it anymore. And what I realized was that if it wasn't essential for him, given what only he can do, which is lead the organization, be the CEO, lead the organization, prepare and preach on Sundays, prepare messages. If it's not something that only he can do, then probably someone else needs to do it.
Yeah.
In the beginning, many times that was me. Most of the time that was me because our staff was really small. As our staff grew, now there are so many people I can hand things off to. But if it's not something only he can do, or something that he needs to do given the season of life of the organization. In the beginning, he met with more people than he does now. In the beginning, he met with more staff than he does now. So what is on his plate has evolved over time. But if it's not what has been determined as a priority for him, then it's my job to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier you talked to him in the early days. You talked to him a few times, and then there's a pattern there, and you started building like a decision-making tree.
Yes.
Yeah, please. The question is well, I guess one is, would you say that all assistants, and maybe all is too much, but like in general, one of an assistant's superpowers they need to cultivate is like pattern recognition and paying attention to regular things so that you can automate, offload, answer for them, et cetera. Would you say that's a necessary part of the job?
I do, but I think it starts with understanding what the boss really wants and how the boss operates. There are people in our organization who want more details than Andy wants, or who want to be more involved with the day-to-day nitty-gritty. And so, how I work with Andy now wouldn't be effective for that person. So I think it has to start with the boss understanding, and maybe it's the assistant helping the boss determine exactly how they want the assistant to function. For him or her.
So then let's go to people who are listening to this and maybe they don't have an assistant, or they've had an assistant and it, quote, didn't work. I think I probably went through 3 or 4 assistants before I feel like I got the hang of it. And that says more about me trying to learn how to manage than it does about the first 2 that I worked with and it didn't work out. So one question is like, when would you say that someone, like, quote, should hire an assistant?
Oh, that's a good question. When you don't have time to focus on what your primary role is, and even if you have time, if what you're focusing on is a distraction.
Yeah, and so then, do you feel like people hire assistants too soon or too late in general?
Probably, well, I don't know. Probably, I would think too late, or they hire them, but they're not ready to hand things off.
Like psychologically ready? Do you see that a lot?
Yes, I do. Especially because I've worked with assistants to pastors. And so I see that a lot, because a pastor thinks he needs to do all the counseling. He thinks he has to meet with everybody who calls, or because it's the church. And well, that's awesome. But if that's not what your highest and best use is for the organization, then you are robbing the organization of what they need from you. Because, so that's just a thought process they all need to go through, an evaluation. What is my highest and best use? And then who can handle what does not remain on my task list?
Yeah.
And it's hard if you like meeting with people, but you shouldn't be. It makes it hard to hand it off if you're good at counseling, but you're not meeting with staff and the staff is suffering, so it's not cut and dry and easy by any means, but.
Well, that's actually, I want to, because there's the line, only do what only you can do. And I find when I'm working with clients and when our team is working with clients that oftentimes, you mentioned it just a second ago, the people have a hard time delegating things that they enjoy doing, but aren't necessarily the things that they should be doing. And have you found any like tips or tricks to help people kind of loosen their white knuckle grip away from things that are good and even enjoyable, but not what they, quote, should be doing?
Coaching and counseling? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I say that facetiously, but sometimes it's true. And sometimes it's just actually thinking about it. I mean, many times people haven't even thought about it. They haven't even evaluated how they're spending their time. They haven't even evaluated where the gaps are in the organization that need to be filled and whether they're the person to fill it. So sometimes it's just talking about it, thinking about it. And then sometimes it really is, asking, okay, why am I not willing to let this go? And if it's something you enjoy doing, then okay, you can do it once a week or once a month, but you can't meet with everybody.
Yeah.
So figuring that out.
That's the other maxim too. The only or do for one what you wish you could do for all.
Yes, that's exactly. So you've listened to Andy. Yes,
I have. I've been heavily influenced by Andy.
And we see, we see that here even with Andy. He can't go visit everybody in the hospital. He can't meet with everybody. But there will be times when he will be like, he'll say, I need to do that. And he will. And it's do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Just because you can't do for everyone doesn't mean you shouldn't do it at all. But it also shouldn't be a distraction from what your primary responsibility is.
Yeah, very good. All right. So then what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they are hiring or managing an assistant?
I think the first mistake is not knowing what they really are hiring for. What do you want? Do you want someone who is going to handle the clerical duties of an assistant, more of a traditional secretary role, receiving emails, receiving phone calls, handling all the files, travel, all the clerical things? Or do you want somebody who's going to be basically an assistant, somebody who's going to come alongside you and partner with you in your role, somebody who's going to be able to sit in meetings on your behalf if it's not a meeting you can participate in or should participate in, somebody who's going to represent you to the staff and the staff to you. Those are two different people in my mind. And, if you hire somebody whose skill set is the clerical side, and expect them to do the other, they're never going to meet your expectations, and you're going to think they're failing. They're not failing. You hired the wrong person. Conversely, if Andy had wanted someone to only do clerical, I would not still be here. I would have been bored, and it would not have been fulfilling. And because that's not where my skill set is, and that's not what motivates me. So what is it you really want the person to do? And then hiring for that. That's the first gap I see many times. It's like, wait a minute, you hired the wrong person.
Yeah, you hired a doer versus maybe a leader or manager.
Right, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's right.
So what do you want them to do? And then being willing to invest the time to help them learn how to assist you.
And how much time do you think realistically does it take to build that partnership to a place where it feels functional?
Oh gosh. It's been a long time since I started with Andy, so I can't remember that far back.
No, but you've seen this happen. You've seen this play out.
It can take weeks or months, but obviously it improves incrementally over time, but you just have to be willing to put in the time. And again, in my mind, it goes back to just being willing to schedule that regular meeting, whatever that looks like. Is it twice a week in the beginning? Does it then shift to once a week? That's what happened for us. So being willing to invest the time and being willing to schedule, to put on the calendar times to evaluate it. So you're not having if there's something that you need to talk to somebody about that is not going to be comfortable, it's one thing if you have to work it in somewhere, but if you've established on the front end, okay, in 1 month, we're going to sit down and we're going to evaluate how it's going. Well, then you both have given each other permission to say, this is working and this isn't working.
Yes.
So, that's with any role. If we're going to meet in 3 weeks and then in 6 weeks, and the purpose of that meeting is to evaluate how it's going, then that gives everybody permission to be able to say the hard things, if there are hard things to say, and to work it out and to figure out how to make adjustments, and not to then just keep, going along thinking, oh, it's not working out. Well, it might just be that you just need to talk about something.
Yeah, that's been my experience with Shannon as we've worked together for 4 years now. We had our anniversary yesterday, work anniversary. Yeah, and there is a lot of adjusting and tweaking and nip tucking and calibrating and learning and new opportunities and getting it wrong for a while and then getting it
right and then getting it wrong again as the season of the life of the in the life cycle of the organization. And a season of life for Andy changed, or a season of life for me changed, and so you just have to be willing to talk about it,
to keep working at it. Now, when you and Andy first started working together, you mentioned that you were at a twice a week cadence. How long, not to be too nitty gritty, but how long were those meetings, and how long did that last?
Our meetings are generally an hour. We schedule an hour, so no more than an hour. If it's more than an hour, I've lost him, it's too much. I don't really remember how long it was. Probably for a few months. We met twice a week. And in the beginning, he was doing his own calendar. So I would sit down and say, here, so-and-so has asked about this. Well, he would turn around and look at his calendar and, give me some options. And so it was longer just because it was more tedious. Well, it didn't take long for him just to give me his calendar, And so then I didn't have to, so that eliminated a large portion of the conversation that had to happen.
I personally believe that one of a leader's greatest flaws is their inability to get things off their plate that should not be on their plate. And there's this tension between efficiency and agency, like where there's a high degree of control and a high degree of speed. It's like the phrase, it'll be faster and easier if I just do it myself.
Yes.
And I think
but
email
at what
and calendar,
cost?
and I think that's what I want to ask you about. So
Yes.
What would you say to somebody if you wanted to convince them you got to get out of your email and you've got to get out of your calendar? Like that, I know that's terrifying for some people. Make the case for why could be the greatest thing that they ever do in their lives.
Well, it goes back to what's your highest and best use for your organization. And there are only, there's a limited number of hours in the day, and you have to go home at some point. Well, you should go home at some point.
Yes.
So what's your window of time to work, and what's your highest and best use of time in that window? And if you need to be working on leadership things, that could mean anything, but you're spending your time in the nitty-gritty answering emails, because then, you've just robbed the organization of your highest and best use. And if you were doing both, if you were just working until all hours of the night, then you're probably robbing your family. So your time is limited. What is the highest and best use of that time? And the other thing is, if you allow your email to dictate your calendar, or to dictate your use of time, then basically it's first come, first. We say this around. We do not want to be the church of first come, first served. We can help you, we can serve you, but if we are not focusing on the important things, then we are not going to be healthy to give you what you need.
Yeah. And it's so easy to just kind of give yourself over to the heroin of responding to emails. And
yes. I do it all the time. Sometimes I'm like, no, I have to quit mail because I can't even see the number in the corner, or else I'm going to be tempted to click on it.
Yes.
I need to be focusing on something else.
Yeah, being like proactive versus reactive all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So did
fantastic.
that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And now I want to flip it. So those some of the mistakes that people make is, one, they hire an assistant too late. Two is they don't really they hire the wrong person for the wrong role. Three is they oftentimes don't delegate. They don't hand things over. Or four, I suppose they don't meet to talk about things and actually diagnose things and troubleshoot things. And I think for you and Andy, it was 2 1-hour meetings for several months, and then you kind of earn the right with each other to meet less frequently.
Correct.
And then I know, Diane, you built like decision-making trees and developed trust over the years. Now let's flip it for a second.
Okay.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see assistants make?
Not being willing to get clarity on what their role should be. They don't understand. Their boss isn't necessarily being clear.
Yes.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
And not being willing to lead up, not being willing to sit down and say, well, how can I help you? Or I don't feel like this is working, or it's not working as efficiently as it could. How can we make it better? Even saying, okay, here's what I see. I see that you're still doing this, this, and this, but I think I could do that for you. So not being willing to speak up and to lead up is the phrase I use, or the term I use, or to lead across, to sit across the desk and say, let's, I have more capacity to help you. You look like you need to hand some things off. So let's talk about what those things are. In the beginning, I remember having, that conversation, or during our conversation, Andy would say, or we would be talking about something, and he would say, well, yes, I need to, or we need to do so-and-so. And I can remember saying frequently, is that something I can do for you? And sometimes he would say, no, I need to do it. Or sometimes he would say, oh yeah, actually you can do this for me. I don't need to be the one doing this. So asking the question, is this something I can do for you? Is that a sufficient, did I answer it? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I could keep pondering it and thinking about it, but that's the thing that comes to mind. And when I've talked to assistants, I think that's the struggle that I hear. The their boss is not handing things off and they don't know how or feel comfortable stepping across or reaching across the desk to facilitate that conversation.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like it's almost like both parties are making the same mistake. Like the leader is being reactive versus proactive, and the assistant biggest mistake is just to react to the person they're working with versus to co-lead and say, here's the mission that you are tasked with. I need to manage you in some ways.
Yes. Or manage I don't ever feel like I manage Andy, but I do feel like I manage the pastor's office, or in another organization, I manage the president's office.
Yeah, make a distinction there. I'm curious. I'd love to hear you wax poetic on the difference, because I'm going to default towards whatever you and Andy are doing works. Like I often feel that Shannon's managing me, and I don't mind, but also that distinction sounds important. So like, how would you make the distinction?
Well, the reality is I do manage his calendar, and so I manage his time. I probably do manage him in that way, but I just don't know that it feels, in my mind, sometimes it doesn't feel respectful to say that, because he's an amazing leader. And he makes his own, he manages himself very well. So I think that's why I say I don't manage him. I don't want it to ever feel disrespectful. But I do manage his calendar. I do manage his time. And then I manage the pastor's office or the president's office in the sense that I am the gatekeeper. So whatever comes into the office, it's my decision within the guidelines that Andy and I have established, but I have to determine what happens to what comes across the desk.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I say I mean when I say I manage the office.
Yeah. Well, and imagine that in some ways let me wrap my mind around this. Like the office is like almost like a machine. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do we make this machine work? And Andy plays his role in that, and I play my role in that.
Exactly.
And we can talk when we feel like the machine's not working, but that way you're not like managing him. He's responsible for himself.
Right.
But you're co-responsible for making the machine work.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Yes.
So much of it, I mentioned this at the beginning, you're the Wizard of Oz. So much of this is invisible. So much of an assistant's work and assistants in a company, their work is oftentimes unseen. What are some of the things that you do or have done that have the biggest impact on Andy's ability to perform at a high level? And I know the general thing of like, well, my job is to clear the path for Andy to focus. But what are some like things that you do that you would love for other assistants to think about as becoming their superpower as they help support the success of somebody else?
For us, it really, and I feel like I'm a broken record, but it really is keeping things off his plate, because that allows him to do what he does to be this amazing leader. So number one would be I am the gatekeeper. And, we talked about a decision tree. I mean, of course, now it's so intuitive, but when something comes in, is it something that he would handle? Okay. Or he would want to know about? Okay. It goes over to this side. If it's not, then it goes over here. And is it something that our office needs to handle? If yes, then I figure it out. If it's not, then I figure out who to delegate it to. If it's something he needs to be involved in, does he need to respond, or can I respond on his behalf? So just that whole figuring out how to handle what comes into our office is one. I respond to emails and phone calls on his behalf. They don't go to him. He gets very few. Andy asked me to thank you so much for your email. And here's the answer to your question. So I respond on his behalf.
I want to ask a tactical question, because I can imagine a lot of people hearing that thinking, I could never do that, because then people would say, well, who does she think she is, or who does he think he is, or or like I got a Dear John email from someone's assistant, like that kind of thing. And I imagine in the early days he responded to every email, and that there was a transition. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you two work together to manage the transition, where culturally it was expected, appreciated, that you were responding on Andy's behalf versus it coming from Andy himself?
It was probably harder in the beginning, because when we were smaller and people did hear from him directly. And I would probably be more apologetic and I would probably give more of an explanation about why I was responding on his behalf. Whereas I don't really do that now. I just say, I'm responding on Andy's behalf. And most of the people who would have heard from him directly anyway probably understood as we grew that, oh yes, I'm not ever, they would understand why they were hearing from me instead of Andy.
Yeah.
And I would try to make it sound very personal. I'm not sure I'm answering your question very clearly, but
No, you did. Yeah, you're great. Let me tell you what I'm hearing, and then you can editorialize it. So what I hear you saying is one is there was a transition period. There is like it starts with you kind of teaching, explaining to people things, and then over time, as you can trust, and I imagine you and Andy have an emotional intelligence to where you can trust that there's a cultural understanding, and as that cultural understanding is built in place, then you can be less apologetic and just get the business. And again, if people are listening to this thinking, I think people have a hard time when CEOs do that, let alone a pastor who isn't your job to like be Mr. Rogers to everybody. And
right.
what I want to suggest something and then see if you agree or change it, which is I believe one of the things that North Point has done very well and that CEOs can learn from is how fanatical you are about the mission and the vision and the cause and teaching. This is another thing I think that when we have Andy on our podcast, I want to ask him about, which is he's created a teaching culture. There's all these maxims like only do what only you can do. You made a joke earlier because I was quoting another Andy-ism of do for one what you wish you could do for all, and all these little isms that kind of bleed through the organization. And I feel like the more you create a culture that says only do what you can do, when you get an email from someone's assistant saying, Andy, thanks you for this and this, this, and this, you don't think, how dare he not respond to me? You think, I'm so glad that Diane is supporting him in this way so that Andy can only do what only Andy can do so that the mission of the organization can be successful, because I want this company to win, and me demanding that he respond to my email might get in the way of us winning, and I'd rather us win than me get a personal email. How does that ring for you?
I think that rings true for people who have been around a long time or people who are knowledgeable enough about our organization. So yes, that does ring true. Some people, they just emailed because they have a need, or they emailed because they have a question, and and my philosophy is, and it's Andy's, we can help you, probably. It just won't be with Andy. So if you email me with an issue or a question or you need something, then, Andy has asked, which is true, Andy has asked so-and-so to be available in situations like this. May I have your permission to connect the two of you? So as long as I feel like I'm offering a solution, then I don't feel bad that it's not Andy. And if they insist that it needs to be Andy, then that's a whole different issue. That they aren't really looking for help, So, so that's sort of my philosophy, or in the back of my head, is we can help you. It's just not going to be Andy. So let's figure out what help you need, and then let me point you to the right person.
And see, Diane, that's brilliant, because oftentimes I think a leader thinks it's their job to solve problems versus create a culture where problems are solved. It's not a leader's job to know everyone. It's a leader's job to make sure everyone is known. It's not a leader's job to, right? It's not a leader's job to help everybody. It's a leader's job to make sure people are getting helped.
Yes. And we really do operate that way here. And we have really from the beginning. So it's, in the beginning when Andy, when we were very new, people would call because they wanted counseling or they wanted business advice or all the things you would call about. And even then, we didn't have staff. There were 10 of us, and Andy, there would be lay people in our in the church that they're the people Andy would have gone to for business advice, or so we would say, so Jason, would you meet with so-and-so on Andy's behalf?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And then knowing that for you as an assistant, knowing that I have permission,
yes,
not to be the solution, but to help people find solutions.
Yes,
I imagine that's very liberating. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about. And by the way, if you're listening to this, the church is no stranger to controversy. In fact, any church, by the way, gets a disproportionate amount of hate mail. Our company is reasonably sized, but we don't get, I don't think, as far as I'm aware, we don't get very much hate mail. Churches get astronomical amounts of hate mail.
Yes.
It's almost like being an elected official. 50% of the country's going to hate you at any given time.
It's so funny. I get emails, we need to take this stand politically. We need to take this stand politically. It's like, could I just let the two of you talk? Because, and y'all work it out? Yeah.
So I imagine then, how do you navigate all that animosity. And I want to start with saying, my guess is the answer isn't necessarily to placate everyone or to apologize to everyone. So even though that may be what people feel like they're entitled to or whatever. So for leaders and assistants thinking about how do we handle the haters, what have been best practices at North Point in order to handle people who, and by the way, I want to make a distinction between people who are coming in good faith, who are hurt or whatever, versus people who are just fiercely committed to being antagonistic regardless of what you do. So what have been best practices there?
Well, first of all, I don't feel an obligation to placate them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel an obligation to make them happy or to satisfy them. And I don't necessarily feel an obligation to answer every one of their questions. If they're demanding their, send their list of 10 questions and why aren't and why don't. And we, as you mentioned earlier, we are very clear about our mission, and we are very clear about why we think we exist and what we're about and how we go about doing our business. And we don't apologize for that. So I get the hate emails if it's about a specific thing somebody thinks Andy has said or something that he has done, and it's a season where we're getting a lot of the same thing. I work with him on crafting a response that I don't ever want to speak on his behalf if they're in important situations like that. So I help, we craft a response, and then I give them our response. Most of the time, it's not emotionally satisfying, but here's our response. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We're glad you reached out. Sort of. We're glad you reached out. Here's our answer to what you're asking. Here's what we have. No, not your answer. Here's what we have to say about what you're asking. And, I hope it answers your questions. Have a great day.
And then now I know anecdotally that occasionally Andy will pick up the phone and make a phone call or go and meet with people.
If it's attendees. If it's the general public, if it's Twitterverse, if it's,
the trolls.
The trolls.
Yeah.
We feel no obligation to that, really. But if it's attendees, then yes, he will, that's something I would tell him about in our meeting. I got an email from so-and-so. I can respond, but here's how long they've been involved. Here's what they've done. I look to our database. They're committed. They've been here for 10 years. He'll pick up the phone and call them. Or we'll ask someone on the team to pick up the phone and call them and have a conversation.
Yeah. So there is like a value for people who have sacrificed, who've contributed, who have been in the trenches
on the journey
together.
With us.
That's right. And that's right. Not coming in good faith and
who really don't understand, who wonder why we did this or we didn't do that or we said this or didn't say that. So yes, if there's somebody who is committed, then absolutely we will. If we have 8 local campuses, and Andy will get the email because he's the voice. But if they attend another campus, then I'll ask the lead pastor at that campus to reach out. So we try to make a personal connection if there's someone who really is on the journey with us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now I'm going to shift gears here as we round third. If someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I love helping other people. I love making a difference. I love, I'm listening to Diane and I'm like, man, I would love to have a job like that. And not only have a job like that, but I would love to be like one of the best in the world at that. Like, I think I could be like in the top 2%, top 1% of assistants in the world. What would you say? One is, how would you describe people who, in your experience, are at that level? So like, what are the attributes of an assistant who is one of the best in the world at what they do?
Okay. And let me say that I'm surrounded by some of those people in this organization. I don't consider myself unique in this organization. So, yes. And that's just not talk. I mean, that's the truth. I think they are people who are emotionally mature, who have emotional intelligence, who understand how they're wired and what they're good at, and who, sort of the things we taught, who are mature enough to understand how to work with their boss, who are willing to reach across the desk, who are willing to lead up, who are willing to, who are problem solvers, who are willing to keep short accounts, who are willing to all the emotional maturity things, all the emotional intelligence things, who know how they're wired and know what motivates them, so they'll know when they're stepping into the right role versus the wrong role, who have community outside the organization or outside their relationship with their boss. So their emotional health isn't dependent upon their relationship with their boss.
How do you build like emotional boundaries? Because it's such a close role, and it's easy. And I think people, especially who have a heart for service and a heart for giving, can unintentionally wrap their identities around work or the person they're supporting. And it certainly doesn't happen on purpose. But like, have you found any strategies or that you and Andy have used in order to maintain the distinction? I know Andy's got a great phrase: choose to cheat, and like cheat your job for your family. Like, don't put your job where your family belongs, that kind of thing. But for you, what does that look like as you work with someone who's making such a huge difference?
Well, first of all, Andy is great at setting boundaries. So he models the way. So it makes it easier for me to set boundaries. When his kids were little, his day ended at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and he went home, and he doesn't do things at night. He still doesn't do things at night. He'll do more because his kids are grown, but he doesn't do evening things because that's family time, and Sandra's involved. His wife is involved in that conversation if he's going to do something at night. There's just always been we are friends. We are friendly. I feel like I could go to him, as my pastor for anything, but there's just a boundary in terms of what we talk about. And he doesn't talk to me about things going on with Sandra. I don't talk to him about things going on with my husband. So there's just a boundary there, even though we are very friendly and friends. And I think I could if I needed to, but we just don't. I mean, we don't travel together. We don't go to lunch together alone. I mean, we just set some natural boundaries to say, okay, we work together very closely. So we need to make sure that there's a line we don't cross, which would unintentionally open the door to things that would not be healthy, either relationally or work-wise. Does that answer? Is that what you were looking for?
Are you not entertained?
No,
I
just want to make sure I'm giving you what you're looking for. So,
Diane, it's all
okay.
great. I love the boundaries of what makes the bulk of your conversation and not. So, like, Andy doesn't talk about his marriage. You don't talk about your marriage, and that aside from like all the sadly nefarious things that happen when men and women work together in the workplace and all that kind of thing.
Right.
So obviously there's that kind of wall, but also it seems like it keeps things clean and clear on why you're there, like what function you provide for each other. So it's not just about keeping shenanigans at bay. It's mostly about keeping focus.
Right.
Let's stay focused on what we're here for.
Right.
And I think there's something really powerful about that. And then you said that he has boundaries in terms of like going home at 4:30 when his kids were at home. Diane, is there something? What's like your version of that? That I get that that's permission giving. When he does that, then you feel the permission to also do that. And do you have like it may be different, but do you have like your version of that?
My version of that would be probably, I have one son, he's 25, so we're empty nesters, but it's easy for me to work at home. I don't turn it off. I mean, I'm answering emails at night because, we're sitting there I'm watching TV with my husband and I can multitask. So, I'm answering emails. So it's not like I go home and cut it off and don't think about it till tomorrow. There's just, but I try to, the boundaries for me are, especially like when my son was little, I didn't do it till he was in bed and the dishes were done and the clothes were in the washer and all the things that needed to be done. And then when we're sitting there watching TV for the hour before we go to bed, my computer's open in my lap. So those are the kinds of boundaries. I've always been available. Andy's known he could call me at any time that if he needed something, but because the boundaries were so clear 90% of the time, if he called me at 9 o'clock at night, then, oh my gosh, there's something, he needs me for something.
It's an emergency.
Or at least urgent or something for tomorrow that we hadn't thought about. So, and it's easy for me to compartmentalize. So even though I say I don't have boundaries or didn't have the boundaries like he did, if somebody on the outside looked in, I'm sure they would say that I did, just because I can compartmentalize. And so even if I'm working on it at home, I'm working on it when I should be working on it. And I'm not cheating my family for it or not cheating, something else for it. Something else that came to mind, which will seem random, but in the beginning, especially we would have things that we would go to events, and my husband and I would go, and Andy and Sandra would be there. Well, it would be really easy for us to, migrate to each other just because of the familiarity. But
Yeah.
I intentionally, for example, if we were in an event and we're sitting at round tables, I would intentionally not sit at the table with Andy and Sandra. I would sit at another table. And the reason was I didn't want Sandra. We would inevitably end up talking about work in some capacity, Andy and I would. I didn't ever want Sandra to feel like, this was a family thing. This was a marriage thing. This was a Andy and Sandra thing, not a work thing. And I didn't ever want Sandra to feel like I was intruding on that, or that work was intruding on that.
That's right. That work's intruding on that.
Yes, that work was intruding. So that would be a boundary that I had set in the early days.
And just to share my thoughts on that, like I just see the deep respect you have for not only Andy, but for Sandra, and also for their marriage and their family. And going back to your one sentence job description, keeping his path clear to focus on the things that matter the most, like marriage and family are like that. And so you knew that if you were at a social function,
yes,
you're going to leave him alone because, of course, if you go up and even chit chat for a second, he's going to slip into work mode, and that's not keeping his path clear to be on family mode.
Exactly. So as I think back, that's a clear boundary that I had set early on. And I didn't really necessarily do it intentionally. I can remember we were at one event, and it was in somebody's home, and we were eating, got a plate and went to sit down, and we sat there and looked at it. And in this one area of the living room, it was Andy and Sandra and Keith and me, my husband and me. And we looked at each other and started laughing, and we got up and moved because we thought, okay, we don't need to be sitting, we talk together. We have opportunity. We need to go talk to other people.
I'll see you at the office.
I'll see you at the office. Right.
That's right.
So, so that was a clear boundary that I'd set. So,
yeah. Well, that's a great example. So then I'll end here. There are more questions that I want to ask, but I'll end here. And so, well, actually two things. One is, because you and I had talked before about some things that I was going to ask you. Is there anything that you wanted to share as you look at your notes and all the work that you put in that you want to share that I haven't asked you about yet, that when we hop off, you're like, oh, I wish I would have, because Diane is very thorough. And so we sent her questions in advance, and then her and I talked ahead of time. And I actually, Diane, have really loved your professionalism even through this. Like it's to brag about you just for a second. And I felt this way from the second that I met you. There is just you feel the high value of excellence.
Thank you.
Feel the high value of, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that. And so, and this podcast has been no different as you prepared. And so when we hopped on here, not to talk too much behind the curtain, Diane there's a team there, and she's in the office, and she's got her iPad open, and she's got these notes. And if you're listening to this, like, she has taken time and energy and care in order to think through what would be helpful for you listening to this. And so is there anything from your notes that you want to make sure that you tell our audience?
Just know yourself first. Know how you're wired. I know that I'm an Enneagram 1. I know that I'm a driver on the right path. I know all those things about me, and I know the great things that come from that. And I know, the challenges that come with that. So hopefully I do a decent job at knowing myself well enough to know when an issue is mine or an issue is ours, or what motivates me, or why I'm feeling stress or tension in a situation. Is it mine, or is there really tension in the situation? So how am I wired? What motivates me? And what impact does that have on the work I do when I sit at this desk every day? And what's mine to own? So that would be one thing.
Can you give not to put you on the spot, but can you give an example of that? Because that is such a sophisticated insight, and it's unusual. I think most people, in our book Beyond High Performance, we had a whole chapter on ownership, and we talk about there's a gag reflex, and then there's a blame reflex. And I think most people are unaware. Most people have a blame reflex versus an ownership reflex, and two, part of the blame reflex is not realizing you're doing it while you're doing it. Like, I'm never happier than when I'm blaming someone without realizing I'm doing it. And so, how have you, Diane, learned how to reflect on, okay, what's going on here, and say the phrase again. Is this mine to own, or is it like how did you say that?
Well, is it mine to own, or is it something that needs to be put on the desk and we need to talk about? Is it ours to discuss, or is it mine to own? I mean, this is maybe a silly, or well, here's the example that I think of. Part of my personality is control. I can remember it going through my head at an event. Well, I don't need to be in control, but somebody does. So,
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to want to control. And so I've learned to ask myself if I'm feeling stress about something, and I will feel like my hands are clenched. Why are my hands clenched? Is it because, is it really somebody else's to own and I'm just feeling the need to take control, or is it really mine to own? So going through that, just through that process, wait a minute, why are my hands clenched? Oh, wait a minute, I just need to do this. It's not mine to own. Why are my hands clenched? It's not mine to own.
Yeah.
Or is it really mine to own? I don't know if that's if I stated that very clearly, but just anyway, that's one of the ways
It is.
I know that.
Yeah, well, part of it is you're noticing that your hands are clenched, and that's both
Yes,
physical and
or
metaphorical.
metaphorically, yeah, but yes.
Right? And then asking the
Yes.
question, like, are my hands clenched because I need to solve this, or because I'm just I'm hoping someone else solves it, and I'm nervous they're not going to, but that's not my thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
And
they
even-
own it, it's theirs, and I want it, but wait a minute, it's not mine to own.
Yeah, that's good. Like, let that go.
Mhm. Yeah, let that go.
I don't
It's
want
not
to be
mine.
secure. Yeah, I don't want to be circuitous, but you did mention something a long time earlier in the conversation, and it's a maxim that actually I had forgotten about from North Point's culture, which is I'm going to butcher it and then I want you to fix it, but I do want our audience to hear it because we just kind of glanced off of it earlier. When there's a gap between expectations and what's the maxim?
Well, we call it trust versus suspicion. And it is when there's a gap between what I experience and what I expect, I choose what goes in the middle, in the gap. And I can either assume the worst or believe the best. And we experience gaps all the time, every day, in every relationship. And do I automatically assume they were just screwing off? Oh, or do I assume, oh, wait, she's late. I thought she was going to be here at 9. It's 10:30. I haven't heard from her. I'm so curious. Something must have happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful, by the way. And if the only thing that people get from listening to this is that principle, my guess is, and maybe even alluded to this, that could be the reason. If we had to pick one, that might be the reason why you and Andy were able to work together for so long, or are able to work together for so long, because you can't do it otherwise. It's funny, in our firm, we have a fierce commitment to being on time to things, and
Right.
and it's very unusual for people to be late. We start meetings on time, and everyone's there, and it's great. And when people aren't on time, and I mean like within 60 seconds, our reflex is to send them a text, and we don't send a text saying, "Hey, where are you?" We don't send a text being like, "Hey, nah." We send a text saying, "Is everything okay?"
That's an
And-
example.
And that's, by the way, that is more for us than it is sometimes for the other person,
Right.
because it's so easy to be like, they did something wrong, or they
Yes.
can't get their stuff
They
together,
know
or
we
whatever.
start every meeting on time. Where are they? Yeah, what's their problem?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
like saying, "Hey, is everything okay?"
Mhm.
reminds me maybe something's not okay,
Right.
and let's give them the benefit of the doubt
The benefit of the doubt.
to say, "Oh,
Yes.
thank you so much. Yeah, like I
Yes.
got in a car accident or whatever," or they could say, "No, like I'm
Yes.
sorry, I just got detached from my calendar," or whatever.
Yes. Now, there are two sides to that. There are people for whom that's really easy. And for those people, if they continue, if somebody continues to miss expectations, then that person has to decide when is there a time, or is it time for me to actually have a conversation about it? Right. And then for the people, flip side, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, there might be a time that you actually need to have a conversation and talk to the person. Are they taking advantage of you, or are you always assuming the worst and you really shouldn't?
Yeah. But even then, there's a way to have that conversation that comes from a place of respect and advocacy versus like antagonism and nastiness. Diane, I want to thank you for your time. And I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but I would love to have you on again and to keep double clicking. It's really fascinating. And thank you for pulling the curtain back to one of the greatest partnerships, I think, one of the greatest like leader assistant partnerships of the last 50 years in business. And so I'm grateful for you. What you're doing does make a difference. And I know
Thank you.
Part of what you pass block for is Andy writing books. And when I was 19 years old, I read a book called Next Generation Leader.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, funnily, that's some of the principles we've been talking about on this call. I read from that book. And my guess is if Andy didn't have someone like you in his life, that book would not have been written. And that book, and as long as many others of his, have changed my life. And so thank you for your contribution to my life.
Thank you for saying that.
And thank you for being on our show.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few more things to let you know about before we go. First, podcast reviews really help us serve more people. So if this podcast is helpful for you, we'd love your help to get it into as many leaders' hands as possible. Please leave us a review, even if it's not 5 stars. And if you really want to go the extra mile, let us know what you'd like to hear more of, or what you think we could do better to serve you and the people you care about. Okay, second, we have more resources for you online, and they're all free. We have free assessments, educational videos, articles from sources like Fast Company, written by our coaches and clients, all designed to help you use our tools in your everyday life and leadership. To dive into the free treasure trove of goodies we have for you, go to novus.global and then click on resources. Some of you have been listening for a while and you haven't yet taken that next step to hire a coach. This is your time. I can't tell you how often I've heard from clients around the world that they wish they would have talked to us sooner. If you have a sense that you're capable of more, we would be thrilled to explore what coaching could do for you and those you influence. Simply email us at begin@novus.global or click the link in the show notes. You also might be listening to this thinking, maybe you want to be a coach, or maybe you already are and you have a vision to build a 6 or 7 figure practice coaching people you love in a way that brings life to you and your clients. Well, that's why we created the Meta Performance Institute for Coaching. It is an in-depth coaching apprenticeship designed to help you create the coaching practice of your dreams. The first step in exploring that is simple. Just go to www.mp, as in metaperformance.institute. There we have free assessments to help you see what kind of training you need to create the coaching practice the way our coaches do at Novus Global. Thank you so much for listening. We love making these for you. And remember, dare to go beyond high performance.